All right, you lot, don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're at it, give us a 5-star rating. Trust me, it really does help us out.
So where did it start with you? When did you first decide? Because to move over from Texas, right, all the way to the UK, and then study and get in, that's a huge outgoing. When did the F1 journey start for you?
I think the F1 journey started
at the very start.
Yeah, the very start was effectively Dad's mate said, right, I've got 2 Spec MX-5 race cars. And the guy had a bit of cash and he was in the fortunate place. He's like, we've got these. It was my dad's business partner. He's like, so do you guys want to come do some track days with these? I was like, yeah, cool. So we got into that and it was fun. I did a couple seasons of Spec MX-5 racing at a club level and I just loved it. I was like, I want to learn how to make race cars go faster. And people were like, well, you should become a mechanical engineer because most race engineers and people that do that kind of stuff, they're engineers. So I was like, okay, cool. Local university had a Formula SAE team. You call it Formula Student in the UK and Europe. It's a design, manufacture, compete Formula car series for it's a university competition. And I was like, this is so cool. You see these miniature Formula 1 cars. And I remember very, very specifically, there was a video of the local university, University of Texas at Arlington. They had a Honda CBR 250RR turbo. So
that's a lot of letters.
So
that's a thing.
It means it's a complex thing. If it's got a name that's that long.
So it was basically a 4-cylinder motorcycle engine.
Yeah.
But this specific Japanese motorcycle engine revved to 20,000 RPM. Whew. So we know when stuff revs that high.
Yeah.
It's a screamer.
Unreal.
So they had a turbo version of this, and I saw a video of this car doing some slalom or something, and I was like, I got to do that. Got involved in that. I graduated, and I was like, I need to do something else. I want to get a job in Formula 1. I didn't become interested in Formula 1 until I was probably 19.
Okay.
So a lot of people here grew up watching the sport. Nobody in my
Were
family.
you into motorsport before that at all?
No. Not much.
F1 your first entry point into that as well.
Yeah, the Spec Miata was grassroots motorsport, competing, and that was fun. But I didn't consume much racing. I didn't watch much NASCAR. I didn't watch much IndyCar. And that happened, and I was like, okay. And then I was like, I'm getting through my degree, and I'm like, I love doing this. Formula 1's the next step logically, but there's this disconnect. There's a gap. It's like, what's next? It's like, and then I heard a lot of people coming over to the UK to do a motorsport master's degree, then getting jobs. And a lot of dudes were at Renault, which is now Alpine. So there was a lot of people that was like, okay, there are American guys and gals doing this. I'm gonna give it a shot. So I pulled together some cash to do a master's degree. I finished the degree and I applied for a student job at Force India. I think my first salary was like 12 grand a year.
Oh,
it was
shocking.
It was basically designed to be a student placement. And they're like,
yeah,
this is what we've got. Yeah. Do you want to take it? Yeah, go on. So I borrowed some more cash to keep me through that next year. And then I got taken on as a full-time very shortly after that. Like, this guy's not a student. And then 8 months into that, I'm asking the chief race engineer, I was like, hey man, I want to be a trackside engineer one day. He's like, well, it's going to take some time. You need to learn all the stuff. And, there's a waiting list. Well, about 4 months after that conversation happened, the other performance engineer had sacked, threw in his notice in at very short notice, one of those things. And they're like, yeah, so we see you've been working in the simulator and that's gone pretty well. Magellan test next week. You coming? I'm like, yeah. And then Barcelona was the week after that. So that was back to the baptism of fire. That was literally being thrown straight into the deep end. Man, I was lost. I was in the weeds for several races.
Well, because not only have you got to get on top of the job, but trackside engineer, you have to be there.
Yeah.
You're on track. So that side of it, did you find that difficult in terms of the traveling, in terms of the stuff around the job? Because you're the job to get on top of, but then all the other stuff as well.
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not doing it now because I decided that was too much for me. But at the time, being a probably 26-year-old dude traveling to every country in the world along the Formula 1 circuit, it was a dream, right?
Yeah.
The girl I was seeing when I started doing that, she's like, oh, when are we going to hang out? I'm like, I guess not. I'm going racing. but to be fair,
I hope you sold her better than that.
That was the message.
Sorry.
She was very much against it, so she very much had to go.
Look, it's one of them things where you've got to. you've got the opportunity. You've got to pursue that dream. And sometimes it doesn't.
She didn't embrace it, so it was like
that's fine. That's fine.
And it was fine, but it's like one of those things. It's well, this is the start of my professional career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the sacrifices you have to make.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things. So a lot of people do manage to make that work in the paddock. Like there's people that have families, but it's hard. You're gone.
Yeah.
You know, the calendar's up to what, 23,
24
24 next year.
Yeah,
24
yeah,
races,
yeah.
double headers, triple headers.
Yeah.
Testing's reduced. You don't have test teams anymore. Fine, but yeah, it's a lifestyle thing, and I was happy to do it at that point. You know, I did have a relationship through the rest of that, but it was tough. And then after 3 years at Force India and 3 years at Red Bull, I was like, I need to go back to the factory. I want my weekends back. You know, because I'm interested in a lot of other stuff, and I don't see myself being a lifer. You know, the guys that have been doing it for 20 years. And my interests were not in running the car. My interests were in, you know, being at the track. I got to understand how everything worked. Then going back to the factory, I had a much better appreciation for how to do things that people that had been in the factory for a long time didn't have a good grasp of. So it was like one of those things I like doing with my data analysis, like breaking down stuff to make other people, help it be easy to understand.
Yeah.
You know, in Formula One, these people already know what they're talking about, but to add the context of how that's used at the track, because that's, at the end of the day, you can optimize this thing. It's like, oh, this is a super optimal process. If we do all these little tiny different things, we can find 100th of a second. I'm like, but if you bore the driver, or if you distract the driver with that, that's going to cost you a 1/10 of a second. I mean, that's a very trivial example, but those are the kind of things. And the perspective from being a trackside engineer going back to the factory was super cool to have, and add value that way. Because most people go from the factory to the track and stay there. But I went from the track back to the factory, and being involved in the simulator performance group. Obviously, you're doing run programs on, you know, preparing for the race, then run programs on Friday nights to help feed back to the track. And it was cool to be able to add a lot more value to that process and improve the quality of that product and help the track. You know, when I went from working with GP at the track to being in the simulator, then feeding him information, my communication and my language with him was very clear.
Yeah.
And we knew how to talk to each other. And I think the whole group absorbed that down the road.